Do you often have aches and pains that you really can't explain? Do you find that you ignore the 100 positives and dwell obsessively on that one negative? Do you often find yourself really overwhelmed by your emotions and don't know why? And do you find yourself unable to stop Netflix binging or social media scrolling? In this video, I'll explain exactly how these things are linked, why they happen, and what's causing them. I am a great believer that knowledge is power. Once you know what's happening, it's so much easier to deal with. I'm Jo Banks. I've been a professional executive coach for almost 15 years, and I'm sharing what I know. One important point before we begin. Our brains are designed for survival, to keep us alive long enough to procreate. They are not designed for happiness. Our brains are on a constant lookout for threats. That's why we can often ignore 100 good things that happen to us and really focus in on that one negative. It makes perfect sense if you think about it. The good things aren't going to hurt us. They're not a threat. However, that one negative thing might be. So we as humans are predisposed to seeking out the negatives. It's a survival mechanism, pure and simple, and it's deeply rooted in our DNA. To explore this in more detail, we need to look at the autonomic nervous system and our fight, flight, freeze, stress response, which, incidentally, rarely looks like bopping someone on the nose, running away, or hiding in a cupboard, although it can. So taking a look at our autonomic nervous system. Now, before we do that, I think it's really important to look at what causes stress and anxiety, although I am sure you already know what's causing the stress in your life. It's things like relentless change. Things never seem to settle down before the next thing arrives. Changing roles, values, cultures, speed of change, technology, relationships, health, increasing expectations, increasing demands, all the economic uncertainty that's going around at the moment, and what we perceive to be limited resources. Now, as humans, all of this uncertainty and feeling out of control is going to cause us stress and anxiety. We have an inbuilt need to look for certainty and to feel in control. When we aren't, that's when the stress and anxiety kick in. And over the next few videos, I'm hopefully going to give you some great tools and understanding of stress and anxiety and what you can do to mitigate it. So taking a quick look now at how stress and anxiety manifest. This is really important because many of us are carrying out activities, or we've got aches and pains and things that are happening in our lives, and we don't necessarily attribute them to stress or anxiety. So first of all, we've got to look at sickness. We're talking about upset stomachs, headaches, aches and pains, especially pain in your hips and in your lower back. And I will discuss that more in an upcoming video. I think I'm going to call it the surprising symptoms of stress. Now, I'm going to share something that happened with me a couple of years ago. So back to lockdown year 2020, week before we went into lockdown, I split up with my partner. Now, also, literally overnight, my business just went into free fall because up until that point, all of my coaching and all of my training had been face-to-face. I didn't do anything virtually. So split up with the partner, straight into chaos with the business. And I had to throw myself into my work to find ways to keep my business going. Otherwise, I was going to lose everything, because when you work for yourself, you don't have somebody in the background paying your bills. You don't have a monthly income. It's like being thrown out of work with no redundancy pay. So I went into self-preservation, trying to keep my business going, everything I possibly could. Now, luckily, I was able to what we call pivot, and I'm sure I'll discuss that in an upcoming video. I was able to pivot, and actually 2020 was one of my most successful years ever because I looked at things from a different perspective, because I tried a lot of different things, and luckily the virtual stuff took off for me. Now, when it came to about October, my back went really, really badly. And up until that point, I'm always fit. I've always been fit. I've always exercised. I was cycling about 150 miles a week. So super fit at that point. And this bad back did not go away. I saw 3 physios, consultants, doctors. Nobody could figure out what was going on. 3 months later, I was still in as much back pain. I was wearing a back brace when I was doing my sessions, and especially I stand up when I deliver training virtually, and so I had to have a back brace on while I was doing that. Didn't know what was wrong. Everybody said there's no reason for this back pain. We can't see anything showing up, until one really, really clever physio said, I know what's going on. You've got something that you haven't dealt with. You've got some sort of psychological pain that you haven't dealt with. And I knew immediately. Burst into tears, and I went, oh my goodness, it's the X. I haven't dealt with that. I just literally put it in a box because I couldn't face trying to deal with that and keep my business going. She said, definitely go away, because she knew I had a lot of tools that would be able to deal with that. Go away, and I'm sure that's going to clear up. Literally within 3 days of taking care of myself and using some of the tools I'll be teaching you, my bad back cleared up. Now, obviously, I am not a doctor, and you should always, always, always go and get checked out. That goes without saying. But if they can't find anything wrong with you, or you've had an ongoing stomach ache or aches, pains, shoulder pain, if it's ongoing for a long time and you can't find any underlying symptom, it could be psychosomatic. Again, I'm not a doctor, always get checked out. But it's definitely worth thinking about, because stress and anxiety manifest in the weirdest places, especially stomach, hips, and lower back, which again, I'll go on to a later date. So look out for that. Really important. Next is doing too much or doing too little. So lethargy and procrastination, can't be botheredness, and then running at the world at 1,000,000 miles an hour, really being overachieving, always having to be on the go, always having to be doing things, feeling guilty for sitting down and relaxing. Then we have that inability to regulate our emotions. So crying, frustration, exploding with anger, and inability to concentrate. We also see a lot of sleep problems, and I'm going to do a whole video on sleep. So that could be not being able to fall asleep, could be waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That is so common for many of us. And then just simply not being able to get up, not feeling refreshed when we've had a full night's sleep. Another biggie, and this is really important to look out for, is what we call numbing. Numbing activities include Netflix binging, online gaming, social media scrolling for hours and hours and hours, excessive shopping, overeating and overindulgence, and alcohol. All those other things are good in small doses. Gives our brain a break. However, when you're spending hours and hours and hours Netflix binging or social media scrolling or gaming, instead of getting out and living your life, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag. Watch out for that if that's what you're doing. Now, awareness of where stress is manifesting in you is really important, because we can't change what we're not aware of. So as we go through the rest of this video, be thinking about, when you feel anxious or stressed, what does it feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? And also, what situations or thoughts make you feel stressed? Some people feel stress in their chest. Others feel it in their stomach, some feel it in their throat, others feel it in their head. So they know when they're stressed, when they get butterflies or when they get a tightness in their chest. So as we go through this, really think about where you feel it, because once you recognize it coming on, then you can do something about it. Really important. So let's take a look at this stress response. The stress response affects our biochemistry. What's happening is our nervous system is perceiving a threat and preparing us for action. Now, here's a really, really important point. Our minds cannot tell the difference between a perceived threat and a real physical threat. So a real physical threat might be somebody running towards you with a knife, or it could be hearing footsteps when you're walking down the street on a dark night. They're potential real physical threats. However, our brains cannot tell the difference between that real physical threat and worrying, panicking, overthinking. Those same worries and thoughts provoke exactly the same physical response as would happen if you were being chased down the street by a saber-toothed tiger. Our brain cannot differentiate between the two. And I know for some of you listening to this, it might feel a bit woo-woo this bit, but it's absolutely clinically proven. So when you get that email from your boss saying we need to talk, when you get a bill in the post, when you start worrying about your future, when you start worrying about your job, all of those types of things trigger off exactly the same stress response as if you were being chased down the street. What is actually happening then is the chemicals adrenaline and cortisol are flooded into your bloodstream, and that's the feeling that you get. That's those chemicals. So that tightness in your chest or that upset stomach, that's those chemicals. What your body is trying to force you into doing is running away, flight, fighting, or freezing, or even fawning until that threat has passed. So the adrenaline and the cortisol fire off into your bloodstream to give you a 15-minute short burst of strength and energy to get you away from the thing it perceives to be the problem. However, we can't run away from our thoughts. There's no way, we just can't do that. It's really important to understand this, because when we're in homeostasis, which is our baseline, when we're calm, when we're happy, when we're just plodding along, we don't feel anxiety, stress, anger, all those negative emotions. It's only when our stress response has been triggered that we feel anything other than calm. This is DNA based. It goes back to our caveman versus saber-toothed tiger, and I'm going to go into that in more detail in the next video about being triggered. So watch out for that. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss it. So it's DNA based, goes right the way back through all our ancestors. Now, if we don't do something with this stress response, so for many of us, we experience the stress response, we get the feeling in the chest or the stomach, and we just sit there. We don't do anything. Now, if we don't go to the gym and burn off, because don't forget those chemicals are to give us a short burst of strength and energy to get us away from the foe or to deal with it physically. If we don't do anything to burn those chemicals off, that stress, those chemicals build up in our bloodstream and over time affect our health. We know that our immune system becomes compromised. We know stress causes heart disease. We know stress causes any amount of illnesses, including bad backs, sore hips, headaches, joint pain, all because we're not dealing with the stress. So really, really important that you recognize what the heck is going on. The wrap up. Our brains cannot tell the difference between an actual physical threat and a vividly imagined one, and responds by triggering our fight, flight, freeze stress response. However, that does not necessarily look like hitting someone, physically running away, or hiding behind a tree, although it can. Recognizing that any negative emotion, including sadness, anger, apathy, or passive aggressiveness, or even if you are doing numbing activities like Netflix binging, typically can indicate that your stress response is triggered. I'm going to talk more on this in the next video, where I'm going to help you identify your typical response to stress so that you can easily spot it when it happens. You'll also be able to see when it happens in others as well. Many of us, especially those of us with childhood trauma, can live in what we call survival mode, where threat levels, perceived or otherwise, remain high, often leading to prolonged depression, anxiety, dissociation, and even burnout. More on these topics, as well as more on how to manage stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in upcoming videos. What next? In the next video, I'm going to go into more detail about why we feel triggered and why it links back to our earliest ancestors. I'll also share one or two of my favorite tools for returning your nervous system back to homeostasis or baseline, helping your brain and body feel calmer so that you're in more control. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss it. As always, thanks so much for everybody who watches until the very end, and thanks for your continued support.